She left for a month with the hottie next door. I served her divorce papers. I never thought my life would become a Reddit drama, the kind you read late at night, shaking your head in disbelief. My name is Mike, I'm 31, and until a few months ago, I genuinely believed I had everything under control. I was your average, uncomplicated guy. No extravagant dreams, just a steady job as a software developer, a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood, and what I thought was a rock-solid marriage to a woman I loved with my whole heart. Laura and I met almost 8 years ago, a lifetime it seems now. Back when I was a fresh-faced 23-year-old, fresh out of college, working my first job, and hopelessly naive about the complexities of life. She was 22, an assistant at a marketing agency, still searching for her passion. A search that, for the record, never really ended, leading her to eventually become a stay-at-home wife. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, one of those typical backyard gatherings with flimsy paper plates and perpetually charred burgers. Laura approached me with a cheeky comment about how I looked like I was plotting my escape. I can't even remember my reply, but it sparked a conversation that lasted the entire evening. Dating her was anything but dull, a welcome change from my predictable routine. Laura was all spontaneity and adventure, always planning last-minute road trips. I, on the other hand, would meticulously figure out the budget, obsessively check the weather, and double-check the gas tank before we even considered hitting the road. Somehow, it worked. We balanced each other out. She injected excitement into my life, and I provided the grounding force. After 3 years of dating, we decided to tie the knot. The wedding was small, intimate, just family and close friends. Neither of us came from wealth, but that didn't diminish the joy. After the wedding, we started building our life together, brick by painstaking brick. We bought a modest 2-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. Nothing fancy, but it had potential. Most evenings, I'd come home from work to find Laura in the kitchen, experimenting with new recipes, or sprawled on the couch, engrossed in her phone, eager to tell me the day's stories, the latest drama with clients or co-workers. She was the vibrant storyteller, and I was the ever-patient listener. We hadn't rushed into having kids, agreeing to wait until we were more financially secure and emotionally ready for that enormous leap. Looking back, I wonder if I grew too complacent. It's frighteningly easy to sink into a routine, especially when life feels stable. Wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. Sure, we had date nights, but I suspect I stopped paying attention to the subtle shifts, the small nuances, like how Laura thrived on attention, how she lit up a room with her energy. She's the kind of person people naturally gravitate towards. I guess I started taking her warmth and vibrancy for granted, assuming they'd always be a constant in our shared life. At the time, I wasn't worried. I thought we were kindred spirits, soulmates. Sure, we had our disagreements. What marriage doesn't, most of the time, they were about trivial matters, like me forgetting to take out the trash, or her leaving shoes scattered all over the house. Nothing earth-shattering. But here's the treacherous thing about relationships. If you neglect them, those tiny cracks can widen, eventually bringing the whole foundation crashing down. I was blindsided. At least I didn't see it coming back then. I foolishly believed we were building something strong and enduring. But sometimes, life has a cruel way of proving you wrong. The trouble began when he moved in next door, replacing the elderly couple who had downsized and had moved to Florida. He was about 28, younger than most of the residents in our neighborhood, a personal trainer, impossibly fit, oozing confidence, and, admittedly, a little too handsome for his own good. He possessed the kind of physique that made heads turn, like he just stepped out of an action movie. But it wasn't just his looks, it was his energy. He was always outside, relentlessly working out, setting up a pull-up bar in his yard, constantly pushing his limits. He quickly became the talk of the neighborhood, the subject of hushed whispers and longing glances. How could she not notice him? We first met Jake when he came over to introduce himself one Saturday morning. He was the epitome of charm, the kind of guy who could effortlessly disarm anyone with a smile. Laura immediately struck up a conversation with him, her energy palpable, firing off questions about where he was from, what he did for a living, how he liked the neighborhood. I remember standing there, smiling politely, nodding along, not thinking anything of it at the time. Laura was naturally outgoing. She could chat with anyone, be just as friendly with the mailman or the guy at the hardware store. It didn't strike me as unusual that she took an interest in Jake. The subtle changes started creeping in gradually. It began with seemingly innocent, casual conversations. Laura always found a reason to be outside when Jake was around. At first, it was innocuous things, getting the mail, watering the plants, taking out the trash. But those quick errands invariably turned into 10 or 15-minute talks. One day, I came home from work and found them chatting in the driveway, Jake leaning casually against his car. Just being neighborly, Laura said, brushing it off like it was nothing. Jake was just telling me about his new gym equipment. It didn't stop there. A few weeks later, Laura decided to bake cookies, something she hadn't done in ages. I didn't think much of it until I saw her heading across the yard with a plate of them in her hand. But then she bought a new set of workout clothes, bright, fitted leggings and a matching top, a stark departure from her usual style. When I asked her about it, she said she was thinking about jogging again, to get back in shape. I didn't push it. Laura had gone through fitness phases to 4, getting intensely excited about working out for a month or 2 before inevitably losing interest. But this time, the timing was suspect. Jake jogged almost every morning, headphones on, running laps around the street. Laura decided her new jogging routine would conveniently start at the same time Jake was out there. One morning, as I was leaving for work, I saw them talking on the sidewalk, Jake pointing, presumably giving Laura advice on how to avoid shin splints. I didn't say anything, but something about that moment gnawed at me. She'd always been glued to her phone, scrolling social media, texting friends, but now she seemed cautious when I came into the room, as if she was hiding something. One night, I caught her scrolling through Instagram, and when I glanced over, I saw Jake's name at the top. She swiped past it quickly, but I saw enough to know she was on his profile. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, claiming she was just checking out his fitness posts or workout tips. I wanted to believe her. One day, I was working in the garage and heard laughter coming from the backyard. I stepped outside and saw Laura and Jake standing by the fence, laughing uproariously about something. Laura was holding an iced tea and Jake was gesturing animatedly, clearly telling a story. They both waved at me like it was no big deal. Jake was just telling me about this funny thing that happened at his gym. She explained later when I asked about it. It was starting to feel incredibly off. You know that feeling when something's not quite right, when your gut is screaming at you, but your brain is desperately trying to ignore it. Laura talked about Jake with a new kind of energy, a certain spark I hadn't seen in a long time. She casually mentioned things he'd said or done. Jake's thinking about getting a dog. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, the way she would catch Laura sneaking quick looks in his direction. Once you notice those things, you can't unsee them. At this point, I hadn't said anything. Part of me didn't want to believe there was anything to worry about. Laura was someone I trusted. We'd been together for years, and I thought we had a solid, unshakable foundation. But another part of me, the one that couldn't ignore the growing unease, started to wonder. I decided to stay quiet for now, to play it cool, but I began paying closer attention. If something was going on, I needed to see it for myself. It was a Saturday morning, and I remember it clearly because it started out so ordinary, so deceptively normal. I got up early, as usual, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the news on my phone. Laura was still asleep. It was a weekend, after all. The house was quiet, just the gentle hum of the coffee maker in the background. For a brief, fleeting moment, I felt a sense of peace. Funny how that works, isn't it? You think everything's fine because you have absolutely no idea what's about to hit you. Laura came into the kitchen about an hour later, still in her pajamas, her hair a mess from sleep, holding her phone in one hand, and I could tell something was off immediately. She had this nervous energy radiating from her, drumming her fingers on the table, staring at her phone as if she was afraid to make eye contact. "Are you okay?" I asked, setting my phone down. "No, actually, no," she said with a heavy sigh. "We need to talk." Anyone who's been in a long-term relationship knows those are the words that can chill you to the bone. My stomach tightened, but I tried to remain calm. "Okay," I said, leaning back in my chair. "What's going on?" Laura hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if she was searching for the right words. Finally, she looked at me and the words spilled out. "I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. I think I have feelings for Jake." I thought I'd misheard her. "What?" She bit her lip, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said quickly, as if she just wanted to get it over with. "It's just I've been spending time with Jake, and I feel this connection. And now I'm confused." Confused. That word hit me harder than anything else she could have said. She wasn't just admitting guilt or confessing she'd made a mistake. She was confused, as if she was trying to solve a perplexing puzzle. I stared at her, my mind racing. Was she saying she wanted to leave? Was she asking for a divorce? I couldn't decipher her meaning, and that made it even worse. "So, what does this mean? Are you saying you're done with us?" "No, not necessarily," she said. "I don't know what I want right now. I love you, Mike, I do, but I can't stop thinking about him, and I need to figure out what these feelings mean." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. We'd been together for years, built a life together, and now she was saying she wasn't sure if she even wanted to be with me anymore. It felt surreal, like I was trapped in some bizarre, twisted dream. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice even. "So, what are you saying? You want to take a break?" She hesitated. "Kind of," she admitted. "I need time to figure things out. I was thinking maybe I could take a month to spend some time with Jake and see if there's something real there. If it doesn't work out, then we can focus on us. on fixing things. I was stunned by her audacity. "You're serious?" I asked, barely able to comprehend the words coming out of her mouth. "I know it sounds crazy, but I don't want to throw away what we have without being sure. I just don't want to live with regrets, you know. Regrets." The word stuck in my mind like a splinter. She was talking about regrets as if she were the one risking everything, as if my feelings were a mere afterthought to her life-altering choices. I sat there, a volatile mixture of anger and disbelief simmering inside me. Part of me wanted to erupt, to scream at her for being so selfish. But another part, a colder, more calculated part, chose to remain quiet, to let her dig her own grave. "Sure," I said, leaning back in my chair, adopting a tone of nonchalance that clearly caught her off guard. "If you think that's what you need, go ahead." Her expression flickered, as if she wasn't sure if I was being serious or mocking her. "I just think it's the best way to figure out where my heart is," she said. "Do what you need to do." Inside, I was already done. The moment she suggested spending a month with another man, something deep inside me switched off. But I didn't want to reveal my hand. If she was willing to abandon our marriage for a fleeting fantasy with the neighbor, I wanted to see just how far she'd take it. "Thank you," she said, a flicker of relief in her eyes. "I know this is a lot to ask, but I really think it's the right thing for us." I stood up, grabbed my coffee mug, and walked towards the sink, carefully avoiding her gaze. "If that's what you need," I repeated, my voice devoid of emotion. She didn't say anything after that, just sat there, probably trying to process the fact that I wasn't arguing, wasn't putting up a fight. Over the next few days, Laura packed a small bag. She told me she'd be staying with Jake, and she made it sound so casual, as if it was just a temporary arrangement. She didn't seem to notice that I wasn't asking questions, wasn't pleading with her to stay. When she finally left, the house felt different, strangely quiet, as if someone had turned down the volume on my life. I stood in the living room after she walked out and stared at the front door, half expecting to feel a surge of anger or heartbreak. But all I felt was a strange sense of peace, as if the crushing weight of pretending everything was fine had finally lifted. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, trying to make sense of the bewildering situation. My wife, the woman I had been with for years, the woman I planned to spend my life with, was leaving me to go live with another man. If it were my own life, I would have dismissed it as some over-the-top TV drama. I started noticing the little things she'd left behind. Her favorite mug on the counter, a pair of shoes by the door, a blanket carelessly draped over the couch. I considered moving them, but decided to leave them where they were, not out of sentimentality, but because I simply didn't want to waste the energy. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to keep myself busy. I stayed late at the office, not because I had to, but because I didn't want to come home to an empty house. When I wasn't working, I hit the gym with renewed vigor. I'd never been a gym regular before, but there was something oddly satisfying about pushing myself physically, about channeling my pent-up frustration into something productive. Friends started noticing that something was off. They asked where Laura was, and I gave vague, evasive answers. She's staying with a friend for a while, trying to sound as casual as possible. I wasn't ready to share the full, humiliating story just yet. The only person I confided in was my dad. I called him a few days after Laura left, and the first thing he said was, "What's wrong?" He's always been able to read me, even over the phone. When I told him what had happened, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then he said, "I hate to say it, son, but it sounds like you're better off without her." At first, I didn't know how to respond. I expected him to be angrier, or at least ask more questions. But then he said something that really resonated with me. "If she doesn't know your worth, why should you wait around for her to figure it out?" I spent so much time trying to understand Laura's decision, wondering where I had gone wrong, that I hadn't even stopped to consider what I deserved. That night, I sat alone in the dark living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantle. We looked so happy in that picture, so full of hope and promise. But now, it just felt like a cruel reminder of everything that had crumbled and fallen apart. By the end of the week, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for Laura to make her grand decision. I was going to make my own. The next day, I called a divorce attorney. Sitting in that sterile, impersonal lawyer's office, I explained the excruciating situation, trying to keep my voice steady even though part of me still couldn't believe it was real. The lawyer listened intently, and when I finished, he said, "You're well within your rights to file for divorce. This kind of situation falls under irreconcilable differences." Hearing those words out loud made something click into place. Irreconcilable differences. That's what we'd become. Laura and I weren't on the same page anymore, and maybe we never truly had been. The lawyer walked me through the legal process, explaining what I needed to do and what to expect. By the time I left his office, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if I'd finally taken control of my life. No longer a passive bystander in my own story. Back home, I started taking small, deliberate steps to prepare for what was coming. I moved some money into a separate account, just in case things got messy later. I walked through the house, cataloguing what was mine and what was hers. I didn't touch her stuff yet, figuring I'd wait until it was official. But in my mind, I was already picturing how the house would look without her. I got used to the quiet. It wasn't as bad as I had expected. In fact, it felt peaceful, even liberating. I didn't have to constantly navigate Laura's shifting moods, or endure the petty arguments over trivial things like whose turn it was to do the dishes. I started hearing things through the grapevine. Rumors that she and Jake were spotted at a cafe downtown, holding hands, looking cozy. I nodded and smiled, pretending it didn't bother me. But inside, I felt a volatile mixture of anger, betrayal, and a surprising dose of pity. Anger because she'd thrown away everything we had for a fleeting fling with a guy who, frankly, didn't strike me as the settling down type. By the third week, I stopped obsessively checking my phone for texts from her. I figured if she wanted to talk, she knew how to reach me. But I wasn't holding my breath. One night while cleaning out the garage, I stumbled upon a box of old photos from when Laura and I first started dating. For a moment, I felt a sharp pang of sadness, a wave of nostalgia washing over me. But then I thought about all the subtle warning signs I'd ignored over the years, all the times I had unconsciously put her needs ahead of mine. I closed the box and set it aside, consigning it to the darkness. I didn't need those memories anymore. Laura made her grand return almost exactly a month later. I hadn't heard much from her during her trial run with Jake, just a few vague, perfunctory texts. Hope you're doing okay. We'll talk when I get back. She didn't even attempt to keep me updated, act like she was torn about her choice. It was as if she'd already written me off as plan B. By this point, I'd stopped caring. I wasn't waiting by the door for her to come to her senses, or pacing the house, wondering what she and Jake were up to. I had filed for divorce. My lawyer had already started drafting the papers. As far as I was concerned, the marriage was over. But I hadn't told her that. When she walked through the door, nothing seemed different, at least on the surface. She had her back slung over her shoulder, her hair neatly styled, a confident, almost triumphant look on her face, as if she just returned from a pleasant vacation and expected me to welcome her with open arms. "I'm back," she said, setting her bag by the door. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels on the TV. "Welcome back," I said, keeping my tone carefully neutral. She walked over and perched on the arm of the couch, her gaze intense. "We should talk," she said, her voice soft and deliberate. "All right," I said, crossing my arms, bracing myself for the inevitable drama. "Talk." Laura gave me a small, hesitant smile. "I've done a lot of thinking," she said, "and I've realized some things about myself about us." I just nodded, waiting for her to continue. She took a deep breath, as if she was about to deliver a perfectly rehearsed speech. "I care about you, Mike. I really do. I think we can work through this. I think we can rebuild what we have." Rebuild. She said it like it was as simple as fixing a leaky faucet. I didn't say anything, letting her feel the weight of the silence. She seemed thrown off by my lack of response, but she pressed on. "Jake's a great guy." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing at how casually she brought him up. "But I realize he's not what I need. He's exciting, sure, but he's immature. He doesn't have the stability you have. I think I just got caught up in the excitement of it all." So, she test-driven the shiny new toy and decided she preferred the old one. "Huh? I see," I said, my voice cool and detached. What had she expected? A bigger reaction. "I know I've hurt you," she said, reaching out to touch my arm. "But I really believe we can get past this. We've been through so much together. We have history. That's not something you just throw away. I want to keep going." I let her spill out all her carefully rehearsed lines about love, forgiveness, and second chances. When she finally finished, I stood up, walked to the kitchen counter, opened the drawer, and pulled out the divorce papers my lawyer had sent over. I set them on the table in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, her smile instantly fading. "Divorce papers," I said simply. Her face went pale. "You're kidding, right?" she said, letting out a nervous laugh. "Nope," I replied, leaning against the counter with my arms crossed. "I'm not kidding." For a moment, she stared at the papers, as if she couldn't believe they were real. Then she looked up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You're divorcing me?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not interested in being your second choice, Laura." Her face shifted from shock to anger in an instant. "Second choice? That's not what this is." I was confused. I needed time to figure things out. "And in the process," I said, cutting her off, "you decided to test the waters with another man. You left. You walked out on our marriage. And now you're back because it didn't work out with him. Do you really think I'm just going to take you back like nothing happened?" Laura opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, her face turning red. "It's not like that," she said, her voice shaking. "I was trying to do the right thing. I didn't want to stay and resent you. So you thought you could have it both ways," I said, finishing her thought. "You could chase your feelings for Jake and come crawling back to me if it didn't pan out." Laura crossed her arms defensively. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "We can fix this." "No," I said firmly. "You made your choice. and now I'm making mine. She looked like she was about to cry. I'd already made my decision. The rest of the conversation was a blur. She tried to argue, tried to guilt me into changing my mind, even dangled the idea of starting a family someday. But none of it worked. She finally stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a long while, staring at the empty space where she'd been, feeling nothing. No sadness, no regret, no second thoughts, just relief. Later that night, I called my lawyer to let him know Laura had seen the papers. Do you want to give her time to process things? He asked. Should we hold off on moving forward? Move forward, I said without hesitation. Standing up to Laura wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. She'd viewed me as a safety net, a convenient fallback option in case her fling with Jake didn't work out. And if she thought I'd accept that, she clearly didn't know me as well as she thought she did. She didn't give up easily, though. Laura wasn't the type to walk away from a fight, especially when she thought she was losing. A few days later, I was jolted out of my sleep by the sound of someone pounding on my front door. She was like she was trying to break it down. Mike opened the door. Reluctantly, I opened it, keeping my expression neutral. What do you want, Laura? She pushed past me and stormed into the living room, acting like she still lived there. We need to talk, she said, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. You can't just file for divorce without giving me a chance to fix things. Arms crossed. I kept my gaze steady. You had your chance, I said quietly. You made your decision when you left. That's not fair, she exclaimed. I didn't leave to end our marriage. I left to figure things out, to make sure I wasn't making a mistake by staying. I couldn't help but let out a dry, humorless laugh. And then, by doing that, you proved you didn't value what we had. You don't test a marriage by running off with someone else. Laura, that's not how it works. She stopped pacing and turned to face me, her eyes blazing with frustration. I was confused. She cried, her voice trembling. I didn't know what I wanted, but I know now. I want us. I want to fix this. Too late, I said, my tone firm. You don't get to come back now just because things didn't work out with Jake. Her face twisted in anger, and she pointed a finger accusingly at me. You're being petty, she said, spitting out the words. I shook my head, remaining calm despite her outburst. It wasn't one mistake, Laura. It was a series of choices. You chose to flirt with Jake. You chose to prioritize your feelings for him over our marriage. And then you chose to leave. Those weren't accidents, Laura. They were deliberate decisions. She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped, her shoulders slumping in defeat. For the first time, she looked truly defeated, broken. What am I supposed to do now? She asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, completely devoid of anger. I shrugged. Everything she'd done had brought her to this point, and there was nothing I could do to change that. That's not my problem anymore, I said. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. She stood there for another moment, looking like she wanted to say something else, to plead one last time. But then she turned and walked out of the house without another word. The divorce process moved quickly after that. She tried to drag her feet, probably hoping I'd change my mind, give her another chance. But I was resolute. She even played the victim to our mutual friends, painting me as cold and heartless, a ruthless monster who had abandoned her in her time of need. My dad, bless him, was fully on my side. When I told him about the final confrontation, he let out a low whistle and shook his head. She's got some nerve, he said, but I'm proud of you, son, for standing your ground. It wasn't an easy thing to do, but it was the right thing to do. My lawyer was sharp, and the evidence of her leaving for Jake made things relatively clear-cut. She tried to argue for spousal support, claiming she'd given up her career for the marriage, but the judge didn't buy it. In the end, we reached a fair settlement. She got a small amount of money and some furniture she picked out, but I kept the house and most of my savings. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than I expected. The final hearing was bittersweet. Sitting in that sterile courtroom, signing the papers that would officially end our marriage felt surreal, almost dreamlike. She looked worn out, exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. I caught her staring at me out of the corner of my eye, but I refused to meet her gaze. As we were sealing the deal, she came up to me to bid me farewell. I thought you wouldn't sigh. She spoke so softly that it was almost a whisper. After the hearing, she approached me in the hallway, her voice soft, almost a whisper. Mike, she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. I'm sorry for everything. I looked at her, searching for the person I had fallen in love with all those years ago, but all I saw was someone I used to know. I know you are. Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to hug me, a gesture that felt completely forced and inappropriate. I stepped back, breaking the contact. Take care of yourself, Laura, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion, before turning and walking away. I heard bits and pieces about her through mutual friends after that. Jake, unsurprisingly, moved on to someone else shortly after she came crawling back to me. She was struggling to find a new job, trying to figure out her next steps in life. I didn't feel smug hearing about her struggles, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. I even ran into her at the grocery store a few months later. We locked eyes for a fleeting moment, a silent acknowledgement of our shared past. She gave me a small, hesitant wave, but I just nodded curtly and kept walking. There was nothing left to say. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled things. Laura thought she could have it both ways, that she could chase her feelings for someone else and come back to me if it didn't work out. But life doesn't work like that. I've learned a lot about myself through this ordeal. I know now that I deserve someone who values me, someone who's fully committed to our relationship, not someone who sees me as a fallback option, a convenient plan B. If I don't find her, that's fine too. For now, my focus is on rebuilding my life on my own terms, finding clarity, and rediscovering who I am outside the confines of a broken marriage. The house feels different now, lighter, more vibrant. I've started making it my own again, rearranging the furniture, painting the walls a bold new color, even turning the spare bedroom into a home office. The quiet isn't lonely anymore. It's peaceful, a welcome respite from the chaos of the past few months. I've taken up new hobbies, like woodworking, and I'm currently working on a coffee table for the living room. My friends have noticed the change in me, too. They say I seem more confident, more relaxed, more like myself. My dad came over last week, took one look around, and smiled knowingly. You've got this, he said. This is your space now, son, and you're thriving in it. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm living life on my own terms, not shackled by someone else's expectations, not weighed down by the uncertainty and resentment of a marriage that wasn't what I thought it was. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not sad. I'm just here, present, focused on building a future that's authentically mine. And that's more than enough. My home feels like mine again, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. Now, after hearing my story, I need to know what you all think. Did I handle this situation correctly? Was I too harsh? Or did I do what was necessary to protect myself and my own happiness? Should I have tried harder to salvage the marriage? Or was I right to walk away? I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspectives, your honest opinions. So tell me, Reddit, based on everything you've read, do you think I made the right choice?